Hey there! Today we're going to talk about this ink, which I always keep under my hat. It is Noodler's Whaler's Sepia, or Whaleman's Sepia, and the original name, as far as I'm concerned, is Manjiro Nakahama. This ink didn't come in this vial. It came in a 4.5 ounce bottle, and I've thrown away pretty much everything of it except for this vial, which I kept for sentimental reasons, I suppose. People have asked me to review an ink that I don't particularly like. This is it. The reason is that in many pens I found this ink is so excessively dry that it simply will not write. Now, I was surprised to see that in many of the pens I use today, it did write reasonably well, but even so, it wasn't the dry side. There was quite a lot of skipping going on, much more than I'm used to. And when I bought this in a 4.5 ounce bottle, I got one of those preppy pens with it. I put this in there as an eyedropper, as an eyedropper mode pen, and it wrote for a day, and then it just dried out completely, and it wouldn't write again. And I've heard from more people that they have this experience. So apparently this is an ink that will run on the dry side. It's also a funny ink. I think if you pour bleach on this, it turns orange or something. I'm not in the habit of pouring bleach on my writing, but if you are, then apparently that's a nice effect. Another thing that I would like to point out, and I hope that other people have this ink and can confirm this so that I'm not actually crazy, this smells like some type of chemical chocolate milk. I kid you not. It's almost like chocolate milk. I'm not sure what I'm inhaling here that gives it that smell. Heaven knows, maybe this is chocolate milk. I don't know what happened here, but it's okay. It's a brown ink. When you write it, when it's wet, when it dries up, it's a very dark grayish color. There's an extensive video on this by Mr. Nathan Tardif, the person who has made this. Check it out on YouTube, and that's all there's to it. So I think I should now give you a writing sample, and that's it. So I hope that's going to be useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay. Whoops. Okay, so here we go with Noodler's Manjiro Nakahama, aka Whaler's Sepia, or Whaleman's Sepia, or the Whale's Sepia, or Sepia from Wales. No, wait, well, fine. The ink is dry, but it is not so dry that it's skipped here. I'd use too light of a pressure, of what we call that, too little pressure there. So bear that in mind, please. Here we have medium. This was an authentic skip. So with these. I've inked up these pens the exact same way I usually do, etc. So oh, the quick. Well, okay, then we have the quick fox there. This is a very wet pen, and you see that it flows fairly well in there. You should also be noticing by now that when this ink is wet, it's actually quite brown. once it dries up, it turns into a sort of weird, very dark grey. Personally, I don't care much for that effect, but I'm sure there are people out there who do. So, I mean, that's a matter of taste, of course. Metallic. Okay, so let's do some passes of this ink with the 6mm parallel nib. Notice that this is a beautiful brown. I mean, I really think that's great. Now keep an eye on there, it's drying and it's greyifying. You can see it there too. It loses its brown quality and it becomes a, I don't know, a somewhat odd grey. I'm really not trying to put this off negatively or anything. It's just that I really don't like that effect. But Flex. It's true. Okay, squeezing out some line variation here is going to be difficult, as you know if you've seen other Inkcyclopedia entries, because this nib is quite hard. Funny thing is that on this paper the ink is not nearly as dry as I'm used to, but this is Rhodia. This is really high quality paper. I'm very interested in what this is going to do with the Copier paper. Let's go back for a second pass. So this is now turned into a dark grey. Now it's brown again. While we're at it, let's do a bit of writing with a really fat nib and see how this thing comes along. This is a W, should you wonder. And we do a bit of medium writing. Ballpoint user at the door. Frodo, there's someone at the door! Let me see. What else should I do? Oh, I know. It's time for the moment you've all been waiting for. The Tardif test. No, this is not a seppuku knife. It is a miniature katana. I think this one has the best ground so far for doing the Tardif test. There you bloody go. The Tardif test. It finally works. Well, we'll see what we have to conclude from that. I wipe my blade and sheathe it. And I'll just put the cap on the ink bottle. There we go. OBKB. I'm really getting that odd chemical chocolate smell right now. It's because of this, of course. It's really strange. I would like to know if anyone who has used this ink has experienced that same odd smell, because it's very pronounced. Whoops. And it's kind of odd. Okay, third pass there. I'll come back to that later. I want to see the eyedropper of death. And I want to see a brush with some water. And we'll come back to those, but first I would like to do, while we're waiting for that, the scorecard, as far as I can do that now. So we have cleaning. Well, cleaning was okay. It's a, well, you can see the ink in the converter here. It maybe stains just a little bit, but it's not terrible as far as I remember. Bleed, oh that's a terrible E, sorry. Bleed through. Pet peeve, I hate it when the E is so large that it's almost like an L. I don't know. Bleed through, we'll have to check that later. Color. Well, 50 Shades of Grey, I would say. Shading. Well, none. I don't really see any shading. I mean, I don't know about you, I just see a dark greyish mass there. Maybe it's just a little bit there, but it's almost, I mean, it's, no. I would say that's no shading. Sorry. What else we got? Flow. See, again we get this sort of Skippy. Flow. Skippy. It's Skippy the bush kangaroo, Rhodia. Flow. What we got with flow? Well, it's dry. I will say dry to okay, because apparently on this paper it's not so bad, but I'll see what it does in the Copier paper, maybe come back to that. Feathering. That too is something we need to see on the other paper. Drying time. Another skip there. And this pen is not particularly prone to skipping, so let me just point that out. Drying time. Well, drying time is, well, it's okay, I guess. Okay to good. This is Rhodia, so it's a little longer anyway. Waterproofness. Now that's an excellent question, isn't it? Waterproofness. Let's grab a tissue. Get rid of that excess water. Let's turn this odd reddish thing, which I think was part of the attractions of the ink. So I would say it's definitely waterproof. The reading has almost, well, hasn't really altered. This is still there completely, so I would say waterproofness is excellent. So if that's what you're looking for, an ink to use when you're whaling, then this is good. What do we deduce from the Tardif test? Yes, thank you. Well, it's a dark mass. There's some, you definitely see that some bits of that brown and a lot of the, well, the shades of grey, in all honesty. I mean, that's quite apparent here that you've got that. So there seems to be some shading here. I'm not sure whether you agree, but I don't see any shading there, and nothing noticeable. So, yeah, there you have it. I think it's time for us to move on to Copier paper and see what that does. or see what the ink does on that, or see what that does to the ink. All depending on your preference. It's still a free country. Okay. So, we start with some F writing. This is what I'm talking about. You saw this pen wrote just perfectly well on the Rhodia. And now it's turned to skips or Russ. Maybe it's just that pen. You see skipping here, I'm using the same pressure I usually do, the same writing speed, all that stuff. And you see that the amount of skips is increasing. This is a very wet pen. I'm really interested in seeing what this one will do. Nothing. You see that? It just keeps writing. So that is suggestive. That's what Sherlock Holmes always said when he pointed something out. Oh, Watson, that is suggestive. So that's what I like to do here. I don't get a chance to do that in daily life a whole lot, but in the Inkcyclopedia I guess I can get away with it. Whoa! What's this? What? I didn't do anything to that pen. Suddenly it starts to flow like there's no tomorrow. Honestly, I've never experienced that with this pen. That an ink just blobs out like that. This is a little disturbing. But it could have been the pen. Converter is not particularly empty or anything. No expanded air. Would be odd with the converter anyway, but you never know. Okay, well let's do some fat writing then. Oh yeah, the chocolate smell again. Man, that's weird. It annoys me. Okay, I'm just going to squeeze some ink into the feed of the flex pen. A few drops, because I do want this pen to flex and not railroad, so I've made it wetter than it was. Flex. Fat. Now that it is overly wet, it has stopped railroading altogether. I shouldn't say overly wet, I haven't really made it wetter, I've just put some more ink in the feed. And now it doesn't really railroad. Funny! Okay, so what do we deduce here? Where's the cap? Here's the cap. This may have been the ink just, the pen just drying out a bit. So if I do a writing sample with that right now, F2, there we go again. Skip, skip. Okay? Medium nib has it to a somewhat lesser degree. You see some skips. There's one. Here is one. Here, there. At the broad nib there was no skipping whatsoever. What you do notice maybe is the feathering. There is some feathering. You see that with that. Let me see. You see that with this E, and here we go E. You see that with the A. There's a little bit of feathering going on there. The italic seems to do fairly well. With a little bit of a skip here and there. Suddenly you get the ink blob, which is a little odd, but okay. And here you got that dried up ink effect. You see, it's really a very dark grey now, I would say, no longer a brown. And that's pretty much all there's to it. Let's have a look at. But I mean, feathering in all, I would say, isn't that bad. I mean, here with this really big nib, it's quite wet. There is not a whole lot of feathering going on. With the flax nib, a little bit, but I've seen worse. So I'm quite impressed with that. And even with this super wet writing, there's definitely feathering, but I mean, no pen would be that wet usually. And you see that that's reflected in the bleed through. But in the regular writing, there really isn't that much bleed through at all. So that's quite cool, I would say. So, let's finish up our scorecard. Bleed through, I would say, is good. Because clearly this is really nice paper, but even there the only bleed through is like tardive test and really fat wet writing and all that stuff. So that's okay. These have dried now, so you can get an idea for the lightest grey all the way to the extremely saturated, dark, almost black grey. Feathering, well, that seems to be okay to good, I would say. Okay, now what about an ink that you could compare to this? Sorry. So here we have nothing, because it doesn't write anymore. Here we have Waterman. No, not Waterman. Waterman? No, man. Whalers Sepia. And here we have Visconti Sepia. I would say the Visconti is somewhat browner. I think this is going to be very difficult to pick up from my camera here under these lighting circumstances, etc. This is a bit more of a brownish sepia, and this is more of a greyish sepia. But I think those two are fairly close in the color range. So, there you have it, and this one is not as dry. Just wanted to say that. In all, I think the dryness wasn't as bad as I feared it would be. But still, in all honesty, this is not my favorite ink of all time. Here we go. Noodler's Manjiro Nakahama. The Whaler Sepia. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.